For 12 years, Michael Adeyemi believed that money was the same thing as love. Every month, without fail, he sent it home. Every month, he told himself the same quiet promise: she will never sell water on that road again. She will never carry a basin on her head under that sun. I am building her a life. And he believed it. Why wouldn't he? He had done the math 100 times. He had wired enough to build a concrete house, enough to retire a woman who had spent 40 years bending her back for other people. He had trusted the numbers. He had trusted his cousin. He had trusted everything except his own 2 eyes. So when Michael Adeyemi finally brought his private jet down onto the cracked airstrip outside the village where he was born, he stepped onto that tarmac like a man arriving at his own celebration. He was 38 years old. He owned a regional cargo airline with 14 aircraft and a name people in 3 countries recognized. He had left this place at 19 with nothing but a mechanic's certificate folded into his back pocket and a mother waving until the bus disappeared. Now he was returning the way he had always dreamed of returning. Not as the poor boy who ran barefoot down the red dirt road, as the son who had made it, as the son who could finally save the woman who had saved him first. But none of that pride survived the drive into the village, because halfway down the main road, in the shimmering heat of the afternoon, Michael saw a figure he would have known anywhere in the world. A small woman. A faded wrapper tied at her waist. A wooden tray balanced on a plastic stool beside her, stacked with sachets of water and warm bottles of soda. She was calling out to passing trucks with a voice worn thin by years of doing exactly this, and Michael's heart stopped inside his chest. Because that woman was his mother, Patricia Adeyemi, selling water. On the same road he used to run down as a barefoot child. On the same road he had promised 12 years ago that she would never work again. The car slowed. Michael did not remember telling the driver to stop. He did not remember opening the door. He only remembered the sound his own shoes made hitting the dirt, and the way his mother's head turned toward the noise, and the confusion that flickered across her face before recognition arrived. She squinted at the tall man in the pressed shirt, stepping out of a car that cost more than the entire street. And then her hand rose slowly to her mouth, and the tray of water sachets trembled on its little stool. "Michael?" she whispered, as if she did not quite believe it, as if she had been picturing this moment for years and had stopped believing it would ever come. He crossed the space between them. He wanted to run. His legs would not let him. Every step forward was a step deeper into a truth he did not yet understand, and some animal part of him already knew that something was terribly, terribly wrong, because his mother was thinner than the woman who lived in his memory. Her hands, when he finally took them, were rough and cracked in a way they should not have been. She smelled of sun and dust and the roadside. And behind her, propped against the stool, was a hand-painted cardboard sign advertising cold water for a few coins. "Mama," he said, and his voice broke on the single word. "Mama, what are you doing out here?" Patricia looked up at her son. Her eyes were wet, but her smile was the smile of a woman who had spent years hiding things. "You came home," she said softly, and she did not answer his question. Michael held his mother's rough hands in his and felt the whole shape of his life tilt sideways. He had built her a house. He had built her a house. Michael did not let go of his mother's hands. He was afraid that if he did, the ground itself might open beneath him. Around them, the road carried on the way it always had. A truck rumbled past, kicking up red dust. A boy on a bicycle called out a greeting to Patricia by name, the way people greet someone they see every single day, in the same spot, doing the same thing. And that small, ordinary moment cut deeper than anything else, because it told Michael the truth his mind was still refusing to accept. This was not a bad afternoon. This was not a woman helping a neighbor for an hour. This was her life. This roadside was her life, and it had been for a long time. "Mama," he said again, more carefully now, the way a man speaks when he is standing on ice and can feel it cracking. "The house. I built you a house. Where is the house?" Something moved across Patricia's face. A flinch, quick and hidden, the way she used to flinch when the landlord came knocking during the years when they had nothing. She pulled her hands gently from his and began, out of pure habit, to straighten the sachets on her tray. Her fingers needed something to do. "You've come so far," she said instead. "You must be tired. Let me close up. Let me make you something to eat." "Mama, there's a place we can talk," she said, still not looking at him. "Not here. Not on the road." And that was when Michael understood that his mother was managing him, softening the ground before he stepped on it. It was a thing she had done all through his childhood, when the news was bad and the money was gone and she needed her son to eat his dinner before she told him they were moving again. He knew that voice. He knew that careful, gentle, protective voice, and hearing it now, from a woman selling water on the roadside, filled him with a dread he could not name. He helped her pack the tray. He carried the little stool. He noticed his driver hovering by the car, unsure of what was happening, and Michael waved him back. Whatever this was, it did not belong to a stranger. They walked together down the road, the successful son in his expensive shoes and the mother in her worn rubber sandals. And every few steps, someone called out to Patricia, and she answered them all by name. She belonged here. She had made a whole small world here on this stretch of dirt, a world of regular customers and passing drivers and children who knew her. And Michael had known nothing about any of it. They turned off the main road onto a narrow footpath, and after a few minutes they reached a small rented room at the back of another family's compound. One room. A thin mattress in the corner. A single cooking pot on a paraffin stove. A plastic bucket for water. A rope strung across the ceiling with 2 wrappers and a blouse hung to dry. Michael stood in the doorway and could not make himself go inside because his eyes were doing the arithmetic his heart had been avoiding. He had wired money home for 12 years, enough for a 4-bedroom house, enough to retire her. And she was living in a rented room the size of a storage closet, sleeping on a mattress on the floor. "Mama," he said, and his voice was very quiet now, the dangerous kind of quiet. "I sent money every month. 12 years. Where did it go?" Patricia set down her tray. She lowered herself onto the edge of the thin mattress like a woman whose bones had been tired for a decade. She folded her hands in her lap, and when she finally looked up at her son, her eyes held something he had never seen in them before. Not surprise, not confusion. "Shame? Sit down, Michael," she said. "There is something I should have told you 6 years ago." Michael did not sit down. He could not. There was too much energy trapped in his body, too much of the boy who used to run down that road still alive inside the man in the expensive shirt. So he stood in the doorway of that one small room, and he waited, and he watched his mother gather the courage to say a thing she had been carrying alone for 6 years. "There is a house," Patricia began. Her voice was steady, but her hands were not. "You did build it, Michael. It is real. It stands exactly where you asked for it to stand, on the family land near the old well. 4 bedrooms, a veranda, a kitchen with a real sink." She paused, and something almost like pride flickered across her tired face. "It is beautiful. You built me a beautiful house." Michael's chest tightened. "Then why are you living here?" "Because I do not live there," she said simply. "Kenneth does." The name landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Kenneth, Michael's cousin, his father's sister's son, the one who had stayed in the village all these years while Michael flew across borders building his airline. The one Michael had trusted with everything, because trust in his family was supposed to mean something. Kenneth had been the man on the ground. Kenneth had received the transfers, because Michael's mother had never learned to use a bank, and Kenneth was family, and family did not steal from family. Kenneth had overseen the building of the house. Kenneth had sent Michael photographs of the walls going up, the roof going on, the paint drying. Michael had looked at those photographs on his phone in an airport lounge in another country and felt his chest swell with a son's satisfaction. "Kenneth lives in my house," Michael repeated slowly, testing each word as though it might not be true if he said it carefully enough. "With his family, his wife." Their 3 children. His wife's mother. Patricia nodded. They moved in the year it was finished. He told me it made sense. He said I did not need 4 bedrooms for one old woman. He said he would look after me, that I would always have a room whenever I wanted it. Her voice thinned. And for a while, I did have a room. A small one, at the back, near the kitchen. But there were so many of them, and only one of me, and after a time, it was easier for everyone if I found somewhere of my own. Michael's hands had curled into fists without his noticing. And the money, he said. I sent money every single month. For you, for food, for your medicine, for your comfort. Where is that money, Mama? For the first time, Patricia looked away from her son. She looked at the wall, at the 2 wrappers hanging from the rope, at the single pot on the stove. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller than he had ever heard it. Kenneth told me the money stopped, she said. Years ago. He said your business had gone through hard times. He said the airline had debts, that you were struggling, that a man building something as big as you were building could not always afford to send money home. He said I should be grateful for what you had already done. He said I should not add to your burden by asking for more. Michael felt the floor shift beneath him. That's a lie, he said. I never missed a single month. Not one. Even when things were hard, I sent it. Mama, I never stopped. And here his mother did the thing that broke him completely. She did not gasp. She did not cover her mouth in shock. She simply nodded, slowly, the nod of a woman confirming something she had suspected for a long, long time. I know, Patricia said quietly. I have known for 6 years, Michael. I knew he was lying to me. And I said nothing. The silence in that little room was the kind that has weight. It pressed down on Michael's shoulders and filled his ears with the sound of his own heartbeat. He had prepared himself, in the space of the last few minutes, for many terrible truths. That the money had been stolen, that Kenneth had lied, that his mother had been cheated by a man she trusted. He could have understood all of that. He had even begun, in the back of his mind, to build the case against his cousin, to imagine the confrontation, the justice, the recovery of everything that had been taken. But this he had not prepared for. His mother had known. For 6 years, she had known that Kenneth was lying, and she had chosen to say nothing. She had chosen the roadside and the rented room and the basin of water sachets over telling her own son the truth. You knew, Michael said. The words came out cracked. Mama, you knew he was stealing from us, and you let him. You let him put you out on that road. Why? In the name of God, why would you do that? Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached beneath the thin mattress and drew out a small tin box, the kind that had once held sweets, its paint worn down to bare metal at the corners from years of handling. She set it on her knees and opened it. Inside were papers. Folded receipts, soft at the creases. Old photographs. And on top, a single sheet, yellowed and brittle, that she lifted out with the care of a woman handling something sacred. Do you remember when you were 11 years old? She asked. Michael did not understand the turn. Mama, the year your father died, she went on, as if she had not heard him. The year the roof came off in the storm and the harvest failed, and there was no money for anything, let alone school fees. Do you remember that you nearly did not go back to school that term? Do you remember that? And Michael, standing in the doorway, felt something old and buried begin to rise in him. He did remember. Dimly, the way a man remembers the shape of a nightmare after he has woken. He remembered his mother crying in the night when she thought he was asleep. He remembered the headmaster's letter. He remembered the terrible weeks when it seemed his education would simply end, at 11, on the same road where she now sold water. You went back to school, Patricia said softly. You never missed a term. You got your certificates. You learned your trade. You became the man who could build his mother a house and fly home in his own aeroplane. She held up the yellowed paper. And do you know why? Because Kenneth's father, your uncle, paid your fees that year. And the year after. And the year after that, until things got better. He had a little money then from his cocoa. And when he was dying, he asked only one thing of his son Kenneth. He said, "Look after your Aunt Patricia. Do not let that woman suffer. This family owes her boy his education. And a debt in this family is not a small thing." Michael stared at the paper in his mother's hand. It was a receipt, a school fees receipt from 27 years ago, stamped and signed. The ink faded almost to nothing. She had kept it. All these years, through every move, through every hardship, she had kept it in a sweet tin under her mattress. So when Kenneth took the money, Patricia said, and now at last her voice trembled, part of me told myself it was fair. His family gave to my son. Now my son's money gives to his family. I told myself the debt was mine to pay. Michael, I told myself I was only paying back what we owed. Michael finally sat down, not because he had decided to, but because his legs simply stopped holding him. He lowered himself onto an overturned bucket beside the doorway and put his head in his hands, and for a long moment he could not speak at all. Because he understood, now, the whole terrible architecture of what had been done to his mother. And the worst part, the part that made his throat close and his eyes sting, was that it had not been done by Kenneth alone. It had been done with his mother's own goodness. Kenneth had not needed to force Patricia into that rented room. He had simply found the one soft place in her heart, the place marked debt and gratitude and a mother's shame, and he had pressed on it, gently, for 6 years. "Mama," Michael said at last, lifting his head, "listen to me. Whatever Uncle paid for my school fees, he paid it out of love. It was a gift. It was never a debt. And even if it was a debt, even if it were the truest debt in the world, do you understand how it has been repaid 1,000 times over?" His voice rose, not in anger at her, but in grief. "I sent money for 12 years. 12 years, Mama. Not for school fees. Enough to build a house. Enough to buy that man and his whole family a comfortable life. If there was ever a debt, it was settled in the first 6 months. Everything after that was theft. Plain theft. And he dressed it up in family and made you feel you deserved to suffer for it." Patricia said nothing. She held the old receipt against her chest. "You do not owe Kenneth your dignity," Michael went on, his voice breaking. "You do not owe him that road. You do not owe him one single day sitting in the sun selling water while he sleeps in the house I built for you. A debt is money. A debt is not a woman's whole life." For the first time since he had found her, Patricia's composure cracked. The careful, managing calm she had held on to all afternoon gave way, and she began to weep, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the deep, quiet way of a person who has held something inside for so long that letting it out feels like a kind of dying. "I was ashamed," she whispered. "That is the true reason, Michael, not the debt. The debt was only the story I told myself so I could bear it. The real reason was shame. How could I call you, my son, flying all over the world, so important, so busy, and tell you that your own cousin had put your mother out on the road? How could I make you leave your life and come home to this?" She gestured around the tiny room. "You worked so hard to escape this place. How could I be the one to drag you back into it? I thought if I stayed quiet, at least one of us would be free of it." And there it was. The same terrible sentence that mothers speak in every language, in every village, in every generation. I thought if I stayed quiet, at least one of us would be free. Michael went to her. He knelt on the bare cement floor in his expensive trousers and put his arms around his mother. And he felt how small she had become, how light, how worn down by 6 years of a burden she should never have carried alone. "I was never free while you were suffering," he said into her shoulder. "Don't you understand that? Every day I thought you were safe in that house. I was carrying you in my heart. Every dollar I sent because I was thinking of you. You were never a burden, Mama. You were the whole reason. You were always the whole reason." Patricia held her son and wept, and outside the small window, the road carried on. They stayed like that for a long time, the son kneeling on the bare floor and the mother holding him as though he were still the boy who used to crawl into her bed during storms. When at last the weeping had run its course, Patricia wiped her face with the corner of her wrapper and tried, out of 40 years of habit, to make things ordinary again. She reached for the paraffin stove. She reached for the single pot. She said something about making him tea, about how he must be hungry after such a long journey. Michael caught her hand gently and stopped her. "No," he said. "You have cooked for me my whole life. Today, you will sit, and you will tell me the rest." Because he understood now that he had only heard the shape of it, not the whole of it. And over the next hour, sitting on the edge of that thin mattress while the afternoon light slid across the wall, Patricia told him the rest. She told him how the house had been finished with such joy, how she had walked through the 4 bedrooms and touched the walls and could not believe that her son had done this thing. She told him how Kenneth's family had come to help her settle in, and how their staying had at first seemed like kindness, and only slowly, month by month, revealed itself as something else. She told him how her room had grown smaller, how her meals had grown later, how she had begun to feel like a visitor in the house that bore her name, and she told him about the water. "I did not start selling water because I was starving," she said, and there was a strange, sad dignity in the way she said it. "Kenneth's wife always gave me food." Enough. She was not cruel, Michael. Whatever else she was. "I started selling water because I could not bear to sit in that house all day and eat food that a woman gave me with resentment in her eyes. I needed something of my own, a little money that no one could say came from Kenneth's goodness. So I bought a tray. And I went to the road." She looked at her son. "The road did not make me ashamed. The road gave me back a little of myself. It was the only place I felt like Patricia Adeyemi and not like the old woman living on Kenneth's charity in her own son's house." Michael listened, and as he listened, something inside him was changing. When he had first stepped off that plane, he had been a man ready to celebrate. When he had first seen her on the road, he had become a man drowning in grief. And now, sitting in this small room, he felt a third thing rising up beneath the grief, cold and clear and steady. Not the hot, flailing anger he had felt at the doorway. Something older and more patient than that. The mind of a man who had built an airline out of nothing, who knew how to survey a problem from every angle before he moved, who understood that the loudest response is rarely the strongest one. "Where is the house, Mama?" he asked. "Exactly, near the old well. You know the place, the land your grandfather left." She hesitated. "But Michael, please, whatever you are thinking, do not shame the family. Do not make a war in front of the whole village. Kenneth's children have done nothing. His wife has done nothing but marry a man with a small heart. If you go there and throw them into the road, you will only become the thing you hate." Michael was quiet for a moment. Then he stood, and he helped his mother to her feet, and he looked at her with a calm that frightened her a little, because she did not recognize it. "I am not going to throw anyone into the road, Mama," he said. "I have a better idea than that." Michael did not go to the house that day. This surprised his mother, who had braced herself for a storm, for shouting, for the terrible scene she had spent 6 years dreading. Instead, her son took her by the arm, walked her out of the little rented room, and did the only thing he was certain of. He took care of her. He drove her to the nearest town and bought her a proper bed, a soft mattress, clean sheets, a small refrigerator, a gas cooker. He bought her clothes that did not smell of the roadside. He took her to a doctor, a real one, and sat in the waiting room while a nurse checked the blood pressure and the tired heart of a woman who had not seen a doctor in years. And that night, for the first time in 6 years, Patricia Adeyemi slept in a real bed with a full stomach and a son sleeping in the next room. But while she slept, Michael did not. He sat up in a rented guest house with his laptop open and his phone in his hand, and he began, quietly and methodically, to build the case the way he built everything, from the foundation up. First, the money. He pulled 12 years of transfer records, every single one, and laid them out in a spreadsheet. Every wire, every date, every amount, all of it flowing month after month into the account Kenneth managed on his mother's behalf. Nearly $200,000 over 12 years. Then he pulled the records for the house. The land had been in the family, yes, but somewhere in the paperwork. Michael suspected he would find the fingerprints of his cousin's ambition. And he was right. He did not have to look far. Because the next morning, quietly, without announcing himself, Michael went to the local land registry, an old building with ceiling fans and stacks of dusty ledgers, and he requested the title documents for the family land near the old well. He waited 2 hours on a wooden bench while a clerk searched, and when the papers finally came, Michael read them once, then twice, and felt the cold, clear thing in his chest settle into place. The house was not in his mother's name. It was not in his name, though he had paid for every brick of it. The title had been transferred 4 years ago into the name of Kenneth Adeyemi. Michael's cousin had not simply moved his family into the house. He had made himself its legal owner. He had used the years of Michael's absence and his mother's trust, and her inability to read the documents to sign the property over to himself, quietly, in an office much like this one, while Patricia sat on the roadside a mile away, selling water and believing the money had stopped. Michael sat on that wooden bench for a long time, holding the papers. A part of him wanted to drive straight to the house, wave the title in Kenneth's face, and watch the man's excuses collapse. That part of him was very loud. But he had learned, over years of hard business, that the loud part of a man is rarely the part that wins. So he folded the papers, thanked the clerk, and left. That afternoon, he found a lawyer, not a friend of the family, not someone Kenneth could charm over a plate of food. A sharp, unsmiling woman in the regional capital who specialized in property fraud and the quiet financial abuse of the elderly, the kind that happens in villages everywhere behind closed doors, where shame keeps the victim silent longer than fear ever could. She read Michael's spreadsheet. She read the title transfer. She looked at him over her glasses. "This is recoverable," she said. "The transfer, the funds, all of it. With what you've shown me, we can take that house back and put your cousin in serious trouble. Do you want me to begin?" Michael thought of his mother sleeping soundly for the first time in 6 years, and he surprised the lawyer with his answer. "Not yet," he said. "There is something I want to build first." The lawyer frowned at him over her glasses. In 22 years of untangling family property fraud, she had met many kinds of clients, but rarely one who held a winning hand and asked to wait. "You understand," she said carefully, "that every week you wait is a week your cousin continues to live in a house that belongs to you. That he continues to collect the benefit of what he stole. Most men in your position want the house back yesterday." "I don't want the house back," Michael said. The lawyer set down her pen. "I'm not sure I follow." And so Michael explained. Not the plan of an angry man, but the plan of a builder, a man who had spent his life turning empty airfields into thriving routes, who understood that the strongest structures are the ones you raise from the ground, not the ones you tear down. He did not want to evict Kenneth's family and become, as his mother had feared, the very thing he despised. He did not want to make 3 children homeless to punish their father. He did not want the whole village to watch the Adeyemi family destroy itself in the dust for everyone to talk about for a generation. That kind of victory was loud, and it was hollow, and it would leave his mother ashamed all over again. What he wanted was something else entirely. He wanted his mother to never again feel that she owed anyone her dignity. He wanted the road, that same road where she had sold water in the sun, the road she had run to in order to feel like herself, to become the road that belonged to her. And he wanted the debt, the whole invented debt that had held his mother captive for 6 years, to be paid back, not in shame, but in a currency that Kenneth would understand far better. Over the next 3 months, Michael Adeyemi went quietly to work. He did not confront his cousin. He did not tell the village what he knew. He let Kenneth believe that the rich cousin had flown in, discovered his mother on the road, tucked her away somewhere comfortable, and flown out again without noticing the rest. A fool with money and no eyes. Exactly the kind of man Kenneth had always taken Michael to be. And while Kenneth believed that, Michael bought the road. Not the whole road, of course, but the frontage, the long stretch of prime land where the main highway passed through the village, the busy artery where trucks and buses and traders slowed down, the very ground where Patricia had set her little stool day after day. Michael's people bought it parcel by parcel, quietly through intermediaries, at fair prices that made the sellers happy. By the time anyone in the village understood what was happening, the land belonged to a company nobody could trace back to the Adeyemi name. And then the construction began. First the surveyors, then the graders, then the trucks bringing gravel and steel and concrete. The village watched, amazed, as the empty roadside where an old woman used to sell water sachets transformed. A filling station rose from the red earth, 4 modern pumps under a bright canopy. Beside it, a rest stop for the long-haul drivers, a clean restaurant, a shop stocked with cold drinks and provisions, toilets that actually worked, a shaded place to park and rest. It was the kind of place travelers stopped at gratefully on a long, hot journey. It was the kind of place that would make money for decades. It was, everyone agreed, the best thing that had ever come to the village. And no one, not the sellers, not the workers, not the curious crowds, and above all, not Kenneth Adeyemi, watching from the veranda of his stolen house, knew who owned it. Until the day the sign went up over the filling station. A large, proud, beautifully painted sign visible from far down the highway in both directions. It read, Patricia Adeyemi Filling Station and Rest Stop. The sign changed everything. In a village, a name is not a small thing. A name on a sign, painted large and lit at night, hanging over the busiest stretch of road for every passing traveler to see, that is a declaration. And the name on that sign was Patricia, not Kenneth. Not the young man who had spent 6 years telling the village that his aunt was a burden he had generously taken in. Patricia Adeyemi, the woman who had sold water on that very spot, now the registered owner of the finest business for 50 miles in any direction. Because that was the part Michael had been most careful about. He did not put the filling station in his own name. He did not put it in a company's name for tax convenience, though his lawyer had suggested it. He signed every document so that the sole legal owner of the land, the buildings, the pumps, the shop, the restaurant, and the account into which all of it flowed, was Patricia Adeyemi, his mother. The illiterate woman who had been cheated out of a house because she could not read a title deed now held, in her own name and in her own hand, a title deed to something far greater. Michael had made certain of it. He had walked her through every page himself, slowly, patiently, until she understood exactly what she owned and exactly why no one could ever take it from her. The morning they opened, Patricia stood beneath her own sign in a fine new wrapper, and the village came out to see. And Michael watched his mother greet her old customers, the truck drivers, the traders, the boy on the bicycle, not from behind a plastic tray on a stool in the sun, but from behind the counter of a business that bore her name. He watched her stand tall for the first time in 6 years. He watched the shame lift off her shoulders like a weight finally set down. But Michael was not finished. There was still the matter of the debt. And here he did the thing his mother would never have imagined, the thing that revealed the full shape of the plan he had been building all along. He hired Kenneth's wife. He offered her a job as a cashier at the filling station. A real job, a fair wage, honest work, and because Kenneth's household had grown used to living on Michael's stolen money, and now that money was gone, she took it. She had little choice. And so the woman who had watched Patricia's room grow smaller and smaller in the stolen house, the woman who had served an old aunt her meals with resentment in her eyes, now came to work each morning at the Patricia Adeyemi filling station. She sat behind the till, she counted the money, she wore the uniform, and she answered, every single day, to the woman whose name hung over the door. She answered to Patricia. Michael arranged it so that his mother was the supervisor, gently and without cruelty. Patricia did not lord it over the younger woman. That was not in her nature, and Michael had not built any of this to turn his mother into something hard. But the order of things was now unmistakable, and the whole village could see it. The woman who had made Patricia a servant in her own house was now Patricia's employee on Patricia's land. The current of debt and gratitude and obligation that Kenneth had reversed for 6 years, Michael had reversed it back, and then some. And he had done it without shouting, without a single blow, without making one child homeless. He had done it the way a builder builds, from the ground up, permanent and impossible to argue with. Kenneth understood, of course. He understood the very first day the sign went up. He stayed away from the filling station for weeks, his pride keeping him on the veranda of his stolen house. But a man cannot stay away from the only filling station in the village forever. The day finally came, as Michael had always known it would, on an ordinary hot afternoon when the road was thick with dust and travelers. Kenneth Adeyemi drove his pickup truck to the filling station because his tank was empty and there was nowhere else within 50 miles to fill it. He had put it off as long as a proud man could. But fuel does not care about pride, and so at last he turned off the highway and pulled up beneath the bright canopy, under the great sign bearing his aunt's name. And he sat in his truck for a long moment before he found the courage to get out. His own wife was behind the till. Michael was there that day. He had made a point of being there, though he stayed back, unseen, watching from the shade of the restaurant veranda. He watched Kenneth walk up to the counter with the stiff, careful gait of a man who knows he is being watched by the whole village. He watched his cousin's eyes move over the polished floor, the full shelves, the uniformed staff, the busy pumps. He watched Kenneth realize, fully and finely, the size of what had been built on the spot where he had left an old woman to sell water in the sun. Kenneth wanted to buy fuel on credit. It was the custom in the village for regular men, and money was tight in his household now, tighter than it had been in years, since the monthly transfers had stopped the moment Michael understood where they had been going. So Kenneth stood at the counter and asked, in a low voice, whether he might open an account, whether he might take his fuel now and settle later, the way a man of standing does. His wife looked at him. Then she looked past him, toward the small office at the side of the shop, where Patricia Adeyemi sat at a clean desk with a ledger open before her. "You'll have to ask the owner," she said quietly. "I can't open an account without her permission." And so Kenneth Adeyemi, who had raised 11-year-old Michael's school fees and turned that gift into a chain, who had stolen a house and a fortune and 6 years of an old woman's dignity, who had built his whole small kingdom on the debt he insisted his aunt could never repay, Kenneth walked across that filling station floor, in front of the travelers and the staff and the God who sees everything. And he stood before Patricia, and he asked his aunt's permission to open an account, to buy fuel, on the land where she had once knelt in the dirt. Patricia looked up at her nephew. She did not gloat. There was no cruelty in her face, only a long, quiet dignity that had been 6 years returning. She might have refused him. She had every right to refuse him, but she was not made the way Kenneth was made. She simply looked at him for a moment, and in that look was everything. The house, the road, the water sachets, the old receipt in the sweet tin, all of it. Then she said, "Yes, you may open an account, Kenneth. Bring your fuel to my cashier." And that was the whole of it. Michael never evicted his cousin. The children kept their beds. No one was thrown into the road. But the debt that had held Patricia captive was not forgiven, and it was not forgotten. It was transferred, turned around completely and set back down where it belonged, so that for the rest of his days, every time Kenneth Adeyemi needed fuel for his truck, he would have to ask his aunt. Michael flew home a week later, but he came back often after that, and every time he landed, he found his mother taller, brighter, more herself. And here is the lesson, the one worth carrying away from this road. Never mistake money for love, and never mistake silence for peace. Real love does not send money and look away. Real love comes home. Real love asks for a photograph. Real love shows up. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments. Would you have taken the house back, or would you have built something new the way Michael did? And if you believe that our parents deserve dignity, protection, and a name over the door. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us what truly matters.